afternoon, everybody. My name is Sherry Branson, and I'm Marketing Project Manager with Kevin Davis Insurance, and I'm now talking to Kenny Boddye, Senior Marketing Specialist from New York. Hi, Kenny.
Hi, Sherry. How's it going?
Going well, going well. Yes, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Yes, and Kenny, I know we launched a very exciting new product in 2016, Cyber Risk. And we know with all the hacking going on in the world right now and lots of breaches, etc., this is a very important product. Can you explain why it's so important?
Thanks, Sherry. That's a really great question. And what folks need to understand out there about cyber is you mentioned hacking, and that's a very big portion of it. But especially when it comes to community associations, that isn't the full story. So yes, hacking is part of it, but any sort of loss or unauthorized access to data would be a breach. And cyber, obviously, you think of computers when you think cyber, hacking, computers, electronic. But the other thing to remember is there's also a paper element there too. So at least in terms of our policy, are there any paper records that get lost or stolen or inappropriately disposed of or destroyed, that could also be a breach, and our policy would cover that too. So there's a whole host of ways in which data can be lost or stolen or missing even, which would constitute a data breach or a cyber breach depending on how you want to term it.
That makes sense. And people forget about paper records.
They do. A lot of people forget about it. And today, everyone likes to think that everyone's paperless, right? Everyone thinks that, everything's on your computer and it's all gone. But, just in your daily life when you're doing your work in your office, sometimes you like to have that paper in front of you so you're going to print it out. We have a lot of property managers and even a lot of board members who are a little bit more old school, so they like to print that stuff out. So I'll give you a really quick example. We had a property manager in New York City. They had a building, a cooperative building, and in that basement of that building, they had these huge filing cabinets just full of applications. And as you might be aware, to live in a cooperative, especially in New York City, it's a process. You don't just send in one little application, you're done. It's more financial records of background checks, all that stuff. So when they switched property managers, the building switched to property managers, their new property manager came in, took out all those filing cabinets, put it on the sidewalk so they can inspect the basement. They didn't know it was in the cabinets. Someone came by and knocked over the cabinets. Then suddenly you have all these applications, social security numbers on the sidewalk, financial documents, the whole 9 yards, just flying onto the street of New York City. Wow. That's a cyber breach. There is no hacking. There's no person in China or Taiwan or wherever, half the world away, hacking in there. But all that information's out there, and those people's information is at stake.
Well, very much so, because the associations are gathering the information.
Exactly.
So I'm sure you're hearing, some associations or some property managers and also brokers who are advising the property managers in the associations. But why, what are the chances of this happening? You just talked about the records being lost and being put on the sidewalk, etc. Are you getting, some people are thinking they might not need it, or,
Yes.
And what do you say to that, when somebody says, why do we need this?
Yep, that's a great question too. And we are getting quite a few people, especially in this day and age when everyone's a little bit tighter on their budgets, especially for their associations. They may not think that it's worth the money to get the coverage. To that, I would say a couple of things. The first one is that you have insurance to protect yourself from, the worst that could happen, the unthinkable. Mm-hmm. And we found that a lot of the situations when cyber would come into play, especially with your community associations, is human error instead of hacking. So I just gave you an example of those cabinets. Mm-hmm. A classic example is you have a property manager that manages multiple buildings. Mm-hmm. And the board might ask for a list of the new tenants or a list of all the people that live on a particular floor. And the property manager goes and tries to send that email off to someone. Well, they mistype the initials in the email address, and it goes off to someone in a completely different building, could go to someone, and that's a completely different company, something like that. That's also a breach. Mm-hmm. And you don't know what that a person on the other end is going to do with that information. Mm-hmm. So to that, I would say first is there's a human error aspect to that, where you always want to have coverage in place just in case something happens that you didn't even fathom about. Right. The second issue I would say to that is when you really think about it, a lot of associations, they collect some data for their residents. And some of them may think a common pushback we get is, well, the property manager handles all that. They handle all of our data. Whenever anyone applies, they go
It's
through the
secure.
Exactly.
They think it's secure.
It's secure. They think they go through that real estate company, that property manager, and it's not really on the association to protect that data.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is, there's still liability there. Because when you live in an HOA, right, Sherry? When you went to apply to live at your HOA, you didn't apply to live at the real estate company. You applied to live at that HOA. So you would expect that if those folks who are on your board get that information, that they're keeping it safe. Which means that if something happens, you're not just going to look to the real estate company or the property management company to make sure that you're kept whole and you're protected. You're going to look at that association too and say, hey, during the process of applying to live at you, my information, something happened to it, I expect you guys to take responsibility as well, right?
Absolutely.
So where that gets a little bit tricky is then you have to look at the management contract. What does their management contract say about that? Does the property manager say, hey, we'll handle everything? Or do they say, you association, you're responsible for it?
Right, ultimately responsible.
Or, which is likely, it's silent. It's ambiguous. Because if the management contract was created within the last, beyond the last 5-10 years, chances are there's no mention of cyber or data or anything like that at all.
Because it wasn't an issue 5 or 10 years ago.
Exactly. So that's the other thing too, because if there's ever any sort of ambiguity or silence on who's responsible, then when a loss happens, everyone's going to point the finger at each other, or there's going to be some sort of ambiguity there. So I like to say it's always important to have that belt and suspenders approach to your insurance, where yes, the property manager may have their own cyber policy, but it's also important the association does too.
Absolutely. One other thing I did want to mention, which you might want to talk about a little bit, is the fact that even though people think their information is secure, the fact of the matter is, not every property management company or association has the proper IT protection in place. So you never want to assume that nothing could happen. Correct?
Correct. And that gets into another aspect of cyber liability that a lot of people don't really realize is part of cyber, and that's the transmission of computer viruses and things like that. Because you just
phishing,
exactly,
sending an email where you download the virus.
Exactly. So you just mentioned security, and like you said, you might have a really robust property management company, and they might say that they have the best IT, but if someone at that property management company opens the wrong email, the best security in the world won't protect their systems or their clients from that. So another aspect of cyber liability that the coverage will kick in for is if the property manager or one of the board members sends off an infected file to a bunch of people, like say in the newsletter or something like that, and that infects other people's computer, and then something happens and they need relief, the cyber policy covers that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very good information. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sherry.